Yo, what up, Street Talks? Eric Kim. All right, Turbo Thought. So, this one is on improving your leverages. So, why is the notion of improving your leverages important, and how to pragmatically integrate this? So, the first thought I have is this notion of Archimedes Lever. So, the mathematician slash philosopher back in ancient Greece was his name was Archimedes, and he said, give me a place to stand, and I shall move the world. And the basic idea is, like, maybe how were the pyramids of Giza built? So a human by themselves to just pick up a heavy ass stone is quite limiting. However, if you put a lever in a fulcrum, you could actually, and then you move the fulcrum, you could like 1,000 quadrillion x your power output, depending on how long your lever is, where you place your lever, etc. And so then the goal then becomes, if you want to move the world, right? Figure out what your Archimedes lever is, which is your greatest strength, and then seek to maximize and exploit it. So, for example, for me, it seems that my greatest strength, or maybe my most OG strength, is blogging, right? And then photography, street photography, teaching, vlogging, etc., marketing, and then also, of course, blending your strengths together in a unique way. You always create your own unique honey. And this is also the funny thing too, is that everyone's always trying to be so unique. You are unique and different without even trying to be unique and different, because that's just the way it is. Like, your genetic DNA is absolutely unique on planet Earth, and then considering that the way you're raised or your environment is truly unique to any other individual on planet Earth, then anything you do is unique. So just know that you're already unique. Any activity you do is unique, right? So I think the biggest problem is we all have our greatest strength, but we look at others or society or what's popular or trending, whatever, and then we think to ourselves, oh, perhaps I should be doing what other people are doing, rather than thinking things carte blanche and thinking for yourself. So, for example, I've been thinking a lot too, right? So I always saw at the gym, they have the bar deadlift, the trap bar. It's like the hexagonal shape. You stand in the middle of it and you can deadlift. And I always thought, that thing was kind of weird. I was just kind of more suspicious of it because I just didn't know what it was. And then, I watched some YouTube videos and I was thinking about it, and I Googled some articles. And in theory, right, because when I first started, powerlifting or deadlifting, whatever, I did a conventional deadlift, right, where your feet are both together. And then I hit a certain ceiling where I couldn't really deadlift anymore. And then I discovered sumo deadlifts because I saw more people doing sumo. And then actually my deadlifts went up to max was 475, and then now I'm just like also kind of rethinking things. And I think I was watching YouTube, this guy named I think Big Boy, the dude's probably on something, but it was very impressive. He did a trap bar deadlift 1,000 pounds. And the thing that actually impressed me most was he didn't use a belt, right? I don't trust, and I'm very suspicious of any weightlifter who uses belts, straps, knee wraps, whatever, because to me it signals some sort of insecurity, right? They're afraid that they might hurt themselves. That's why they use a belt. Or the desire is to lift more, which is fine, but then it's just weakening a chain and link. But anyways, so it seems like also another good way to maximize your leverages is to think things carte blanche, blank slate, white sheet of paper, black slate, whatever you want to think, is because whenever you think by analogy, that is, you look at other people and you go, oh, that's what's, other people have done that before and that's what's successful. And therefore, if I just, imitate that and just iterate it a little bit, it will make things better. So kind of like Virgil Abloh's 3% rule, just take a pre-existing concept, change it 3% and it's unique. And that's a good approach. It's kind of more the Kaizen Toyota approach. But one thing I'm starting to discover and think about Toyota, at least, right? Toyota makes incredibly, I mean, for the most part, pretty dependable cars, but man, at the end of the day, like, nobody cares about Toyota, right? like you think about Toyota, the Toyota way. It's the Japanese Toyota method and approach. What we prefer is we love the radical innovation American way. So we love the Elon Musk, we love the Tesla. It's like 1,000 quadrillion times more interesting. Like, no one's gonna be like, I saw this on a bumper sticker and I see it's like, no one's like, hey, cool Prius, bro. Or no one's like, I love your Corolla. And even certain cars which are pretty cool, like the Supra, right? Like the new Supra. I mean, it's pretty cool, but then it's kind of like, looks a little weird. I mean, at least it's good that they made it into a new manual transmission. And even the new Toyota GR Corolla, the all-wheel drive one that's coming out, I think the back end looks so boring. And I look at old Toyotas, like none of them, like all the designs are so ugly and none of them have really held up over time. Anyways, why did I bring up the Toyota? Oh yeah, so anyways, the reason why Elon Musk and Tesla and stuff is so great is that rather than thinking by analogy, oh, let me take pre-existing products that have already done past, and it's actually much more like expensive and difficult to think this way, is to always think carte blanche, right? So ideally, right, like assuming there weren't all these stupid, physical constraints, right? Every time you design a new model of a car, rather than thinking, okay, so for example, this is the current generation car, Corolla we have. How can we take the pre-existing chassis and make it a little bit better, right? Ideally, you would always think carte blanche or blank slate, and then rather than thinking, oh, how do we take this pre-existing thing and make it a little better? How do we totally just wipe the slate clean and just create it totally new and afresh? And this way, thinking is very difficult and expensive, because thinking by analogy is much easier. To think carte blanche, it's much more difficult. And just because it's more difficult doesn't mean it's better. But in thinking things carte blanche, the biggest benefit is that it re-challenges you the way you think that things should be done. And you could think of ways to create new 1000x improvements or new leverages. So for example, Elon Musk, right? So, I mean, it's crazy, right? It's the year 2022. Why are we still building and purchasing and driving petroleum vehicles? Like, to me, that's absolutely insane. That's so, like, can you imagine if your iPhone had to run on petroleum, like a gas lamp, right? It's funny because, like, all these hipsters, right? They try to do all these old school things. Like, can you imagine lighting your house without electricity, only gas lamp, or without using running electricity and Wi-Fi? You only used like a hand crank. But anyways, so an electric car, it's the thing that makes the most sense. And granted, it still takes, like, if you're charging at home, unless you have one of those install Tesla things or fast chargers, charging often takes forever and stuff. But at least to me, it's definitely a step in the right way. So rather than thinking about analogy, like also in fashion, right? The biggest issue in fashion is people always think by analogy. Right? So people always look at other people's fashion and be like, okay, so that cool guy is wearing that cool outfit, and therefore I'll just copy his outfit or her outfit and make it cooler. But actually, like, one thing I've been thinking about a lot, right, is like, just think about clothes in general. It's like, why do you even need clothes? What are clothes for? And the closest thing I got is kind of like the Spartan 300 approach, right? Where ideally you don't wear any clothes. Like, this is my new rule, right? It's like what is considered quote proper versus what is legal and what's illegal. So if you're in public, at least as a man, right? The only rule is you're not allowed to be naked, right? Like, in theory, you can even walk around in public in just a swimsuit, no shirt, no shoes. You should be okay, right? And then in theory, you could walk around in your boxers too. It should be fine. But then, certainly you enter an establishment, and this is kind of a fun trick that I had. I was house sitting for a friend in North Park in San Diego for a bit. There's a local city Target, and I would always go in without my shirt on, and then I would just like chill until someone asked me, like security guy asked me to put on my shirt. So it seems that to test that limit and that boundary until somebody tells you the proper decorum, it seems like a good strategy. And so in some ways, so in Korean, it's funny, there's this notion of nunchi, right? So the notion of nunchi is, nun is like eyes, chi is, I guess, like sense or feeling. So nunchi in Korean is like looking at other people and figuring out what kind of behavior is proper and improper, right? So actually growing up, all of my friends and people always say, oh, 상진이 눈치 없어, or Eric has no nunchi, right? And so the basic idea is that like Eric kind of doesn't follow social norms, and in Korean society this is a huge no-no, right? Because there's an old Chinese proverb, most Asiatic places derive from China. Chinese mode of thought is the nail that sticks out the most needs to be hammered in the hardest. And the reason why this is significant is in Asian Confucian literati culture, right? The goal isn't to be unique. The goal is actually to be the perfectly subservient civil servant. Now, in America, things become interesting because, you have the initial settlers, just like, give a middle finger to the British. And then I think actually what happens in America is a combination of like pop culture, Hollywood, films, land of freedom, individuality. Then this notion of personal individuality comes out, where it is actually more prized to be an individual than to fit in. And actually, ironically, I read this one. It's like people was like, "Oh, be so different, be unique, be yourself." No, but not like that. So, like even certain things I find so funny in America, right? Like it is considered improper to be loud, like vocally, like only low class people like are loud and rowdy and ratchet. And even a thing that's been very fun, going to the gym. Like I've actually found that doing like a war cry or a power grunt before trying a one rep, like, right, and then trying it actually does increase your test and your strength. But you're not allowed to be loud at the gym. You're supposed to be quiet, right? But then ironically, you're allowed to buy this loud sports car and drive around. This is funny too, because like people often look at you with chagrin when you're walking around public spaces with your top off, like without your shirt on. But you're allowed to drive with a convertible car. So it becomes this weird thing where still in American society, we are still pretty Puritan, like Quaker vibes, where we still do follow this prim and proper British notions of old Victorian notions of what's proper. And we are only allowed to be individualistic insofar much as it implies some sort of consumerism. So for example, you are allowed to buy a certain new outfit to look certain fashionable, but you're not allowed to act in a totally aberrant way, which confuses people. People don't like that. But anyways, so other ways thinking about maximizing your leverages. So a simple the turbo thought I had was initially from the gym. So I've always been interested in fitness ever since I was like a fat kid, and I wanted to become the strongest out of all my friends, which I did achieve. So for example, even when you're doing a squat, right? Like the rule, especially if you go to powerlifting competitions, whatever. I've never been to a competition. I have zero interest. So, you have to go parallel or below parallel or all the way to the floor. And I found that actually with squatting, right? Like just squat however low you want, right? Like it could just be like a mini squat, whatever. Even holding the bar takes quite courage. So that can improve your leverages in your squats. With a deadlift, yeah, I would encourage doing sumo deadlift instead of conventional if you have a straight bar. If there's a trap bar, give the trap bar a go. I'm very interested in that. That's going to be a new thing I experiment. Also, something I've also discovered is bench press is probably the worst type of lift to do at the gym, especially on the bench. Instead of bench press, use a dumbbell press, because I've found, right, if you're pushing like this, actually a neutral grip where your hands are down by your sides is more natural than this. Even when doing chin-ups, don't do it underhand or like this. Do it neutral grip like this, and it gives you actually better leverages. And what is the upside of better leverages? Yeah, better leverage, you could actually lift more weight or do more repetitions or whatever have you. So you could actually maximize your power output because there is more efficiency in the movement. There's less force being wasted on superfluous things. So I think that's the goal then, is it's kind of like energy loss minimization. And just think about it from a physics perspective, right? Also, the benefit of doing email newsletters, I use sendy.co instead of a MailChimp because it's like 1,000x cheaper. I think when I had with my email newsletter with like 10,000 subscribers, I think with MailChimp I was paying like $200-300 a month, which is a lot. Now with Sendy, I set it up through Amazon email services. It was kind of a pain in the butt to set up, but now it's worth it. Now every time I send out an email, it's only like a few bucks, a few dollars, which is nice. And so as a, internet personality or media creator, email newsletter is like a quadrillion times better than social media. Like, I'll give you an example. So on Facebook, on my Facebook fan page, it sounds so dated, right? I have like 100,000 followers, likes, whatever. And every time I post something, maybe 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people might see it organically. And the only way to increase your reach is to quote boost your post, which is essentially you need to, give Facebook money, right? And then hopefully, right? Instagram is owned by Facebook, right? Same thing there. Whereas an email newsletter, I send an email newsletter, it's actually sent to everybody. And usually my open rate's maybe like 30%, like a third of people open email, which is really good, right? So like, let's say I have about like 10,000 subscribers on my email newsletter, right? I send out an email or a newsletter, whatever, instead of like 100 people seeing it on Facebook, 10,000 people will at least see it, and then open it might be like 3,000, which is a lot of people, right? And then comparing this to even YouTube, it's funny because the reason I still like to use YouTube is that it's an open, closest thing we have to an open and free platform for sharing videos. And a lot of my friends still like to watch YouTube. Shout out to Anthony Larson and the homies. But even if you I think on YouTube, what I don't really check, maybe have like 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. Organically, like 10 people or 15 people or 20 people or 100 people might see it. And also YouTube, which is essentially Google, right? They're always changing the algorithm. So not everyone's gonna see your post, and I just do it mostly for funsies. Probably more robust is maybe using a podcast, right? Like I use Anchor, which is Anchor. Just Google Anchor. It's owned by Spotify. Super easy to make a podcast, and also a thought on maximizing your leverages is that you yourself are not scalable. And like, this is one thing I've discovered after maybe like a decade plus of like self-employment entrepreneurship. It is better to just do things by yourself on your own, because there will never be some sort of limiting factor. So whenever you work with other people, I love other people and working with other people stuff, right? But always the issue is that Other people will not work at your tempo, your pace, or do as you would like to do because they are not you. Whereas if you do things that are totally 100% by yourself, then you know that it all depends on you. And to me, this is a much more empowering thought is I'd rather, like, so even for example, I thought like, I really wanted to learn how to program, right? Computer program, whatever. I tried to get into like a quadrillion times, and every time I'm like, I'm not into it, right? So maybe for me to improve my leverages, I should just blog more, vlog more, send more emails, do more of what I'm already really good at, teach more workshops, marketing, selling products and stuff like that. And, just being me, right? Also, one thing that I'm a huge fan of is the new GoPro. I just keep it literally in my front right pocket, right? Also, front right pocket, Ricoh GR3X. Currently the best camera in existence. And also to improve your leverages, also like a big thing is embracing smaller file sizes. So even with video, I found that 720p is kind of the ideal size where it's not too big, not too small, whatever. Even 1080p seems unnecessary. 4K is cool, but then if you live somewhere that the upload speeds are slow, then it's not good. But actually, even when I used to live in my old place that had like fiber optic internet, one of the big downsides of 4K when you upload to YouTube or whatever is even though you could upload it super fast, to have the video to process takes quite a long time as well. So anything that is lighter, smaller file size is actually superior. I'll give you another example. So even when I send out email newsletter, I use Markdown, which is the plain text syntax on IA Writer, and I use the voice dictation, which is a much better leverage. And this is also another thing people don't understand is that your voice is a superior leverage than typing, right? So I could type 140 words per minute, but in theory, I could speak much faster than I could type, even though I could type very fast. And also the nice thing about speaking is there's so much hidden nuance and richness and texture in speaking than the written text, because you think about it, if you type something or you write something by hand, let's assume everyone's using English, you cannot hear somebody's unique voice, like sonority, via the text. Whereas if you listen to a podcast or look at a video, whatever, you could actually get a better sense of somebody's personality. Also the pauses in between, the ums and whatever, it actually does add personality and texture to people's voices. So actually I think that more people should blog or vlog or do podcasts. I mean, you could just use your iPhone, you could use a GoPro, simplest thing possible. Like even this thing I'm using, an iPad Pro with the ultra wide video for vlogging, because I find it easier and simpler. So think to yourself, how can I maximize your leverages? Figure out where your what are the chinks in the chain. So for example, even with blogging, and I use WordPress, wordpress.org to blog. I've actually found that the whole featured images thing is quite slow and limiting, because like, let's say I write something, I put a title and I put in a text, right? And then what happens is I try to find the perfect image or the perfect, accessory image to best accentuate my image, right? And that actually slows me down because rather than publishing the thought and just kind of getting it out there, I'm like trying to create a new image or select an image which best accentuates the thought. So actually even a path towards greater productivity is to not use featured images when you're blogging is another turbo thought. But anyways, this notion of leverage is interesting on my mind. I'll just keep turbo thoughting it. So I encourage you to just meditate on the notion of leverages. Google Archimedes Lever. Just go on Google, search Archimedes Lever, Eric Kim. I have a pretty good article on it. And think about how you can move the world.